Hi there, I hope you are having an awesome day wherever you are, and I hope the sun is shining wherever you are. I am going to talk about food triggers. We're going to go over food allergies, food intolerances, and food sensitivities. And you might think, no, I don't have any food allergies, but I encourage you to listen to this just so you have a good understanding of the differences between intolerances and sensitivities. And there may be some symptoms that you're experiencing that you think are just tied to your genes. You might think that you are destined to have those symptoms, and you might not realize that there's some food triggers happening. There's some inflammatory triggers going on in the body that you can control. So let's go into that, and today I'm going to choose dairy to discuss, and we'll talk about gluten another time, but I think it would be a little bit too much to be going through all the common food triggers. And yes, you can do something about it if you do find you have food sensitivities, or there are certain foods that triggers an inflammatory reaction. And how would you know that? You might be getting headaches, you might have toxic weight, you might have midsection weight that you cannot lose, you might have thyroid issue that you might not know that the certain food could be actually affecting your thyroid hormone receptors, causing you not to utilize thyroid hormone properly, whether you're taking it as Synthroid or you're able to make enough of your own T4. Either situation, you could be feeling much better if you do in fact have a food intolerance or sensitivity that you don't know about yet. So other symptoms would be imbalanced hormones like premenstrual. You might be having pain and inflammation. You might be having depression, acne, anxiety, or common ones that are related to low-grade inflammatory reactions in the body. So let's jump into dairy itself. So a dairy intolerance, so there's dairy allergy. Let's talk about that first. And that's when somebody's making an IgE-mediated response. They're making IgE antibodies in the body, and that can cause the throat to swell and close. That can cause vomiting, loose stool, different things like that. But it can be fatal. So it's a very serious allergy, and that's when people use EpiPens. They need to hold on to them so that they can inject some adrenaline to counteract the response, the effect that the IgE antibody is having. So that's allergy. True allergy, very serious, person cannot eat it. The next one down is intolerance, and that can be genetic. That can be when you don't have the enzyme to actually break down the food, like a lactose intolerance. You don't have the lactase enzyme. And there are things that you can do about those that we'll get into in a bit. So that's when you are unable to digest that food. You might get loose stool, you might get gas, cramping, or it might go the other way and it might slow your bowels down. That's less obvious, and some people don't realize the connection because it's not as extreme or it's not as immediate. You don't notice it until a day or 2 days later. And then the third one is food sensitivity. Basically, a food sensitivity, which are more common than we think, it's when you eat the food, you feel worse. When you don't eat the food, you feel better. That's a sensitivity. You will not die from a sensitivity, but it can be slowing down your health, pathways in your body. It can cause brain fog, fatigue, headaches, sleepiness after you eat, things like that. And sensitivities could go on to be intolerances, or they might just stay as sensitivities. And sensitivities can come from dysbioses, not enough good bugs, too many bad bugs in the gut. It can be low stomach acid and low digestive enzymes made by your good bacteria and by your pancreas. And those things can be fixed. And how you test for food sensitivities, there's two different ways. I've been using Rocky Mountain Labs in my practice the whole time I've been practicing, basically, so for 15 years. They are in Edmonton, and I order test kits to test food allergies with them. And we need about, it's not very much blood from the patient. We send it off in a test tube to Rocky Mountain, and they look for food sensitivities to 92 of the most common foods. So what they're looking for is not IgE, but IgG antibody. And an IgE antibody response can cause achiness, joint pain, headaches, swelling, stomach pain, brain fog. I think I caught most of it. So that's how you can test. The other way you can test, it's free. You can just eliminate the foods, the most common triggers, which would be gluten, dairy, sugar, If you want the whole list, just comment below and I can put the list. You would remove them, or if you think you're suspect to say one certain food, you would eliminate that food for 30 to 60 days, see how you feel, and then reintroduce the food and see if the symptoms that you're concerned about have come back, or if any symptoms have come back when you reintroduce the food. And you've got to go pretty strict. You've got to be 100% if you're going to do a true elimination. You take that one food, take it out for 30 to 60 days, then reintroduce it. And that will tell you right there if you have a food sensitivity. Obviously, you wouldn't do this with an allergy. If it's a full, true allergy, you would not be trying the food at all. You'd have to get tested with your allergist for that. So that's completely separate. We're talking about intolerances and sensitivities here. So let's dive into dairy, the food. Not a bad food. In small amounts, it is a good food. There's a lot of nutrients in dairy. Some people can't tolerate dairy. More and more people, quite a few people have a hard time digesting dairy. And organic is always better because there's less hormones and antibiotics in organic dairy. Those are the reasons, so that we're not taking on more hormones, more estrogens, and more putting antibiotics into our system with non-organic dairy. So using small amounts, usually most people do okay with that. But there are some people that are intolerant to dairy, and that's when they're lactose intolerant, when they don't have the lactase enzyme to digest it. So that's when they get cramping, diarrhea. It's pretty immediate with an intolerance. But then there's those people that are sensitive to it. They take it out, they feel better. They put it in, they don't feel great. And it can be because they're not digesting the proteins in dairy very well. The whey and the casein morphines. And just as you might think, casein morphines have a reaction in the body. And that's the part that can make cheese so addictive. Many people say to me, I love cheese. I love it. And you're not alone. I hear that. So it's probably the food I hear the most about that people cannot stay away from. And it can be a true addiction. If you are sensitive to the casein morphines, you can actually get like a little response, we'll call it, afterwards. And those of you that cannot have cheese in your fridge, or you are going to eat it every single day, you cannot skip a day with having a chunk of cheese, you're probably more sensitive to it. So you're truly addicted to it, where it's better for you not to have it in the house and just have it when you're out, so that you're not having it every day. Because if you have a sensitivity to it, then it's triggering inflammation in the body. Probably a low-grade inflammatory response. If it was acute, you'd be so uncomfortable you wouldn't eat it. But if it's a low-grade inflammatory response, that can cause inflammation in the joints, inflammation in the bowel. Because a lot of leaky gut and irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, is truly often a dairy sensitivity or intolerance. And sometimes the tolerance and the sensitivity is caused by a dysbiosis, not enough good bugs in the gut, or not enough stomach acid, or not enough digestive enzymes to be able to break down the dairy. So sometimes you can correct the problem, but to get rid of the problem, you always need to take it out for a time, because if you're sensitive to it, it's damaging your gut lining. If you're sensitive to it and it's causing that inflammatory response, think about what it's doing to your adrenal glands every time you go through that inflammatory response. The adrenals are getting hit. Go to fight or flight. Get out the cortisol, which is an anti-inflammatory. And so if you're constantly eating a food that you're sensitive to, you are constantly asking the body to go in fight or flight to put out an anti-inflammatory, and that can wear the adrenal glands down. Adrenal glands can be worn down by stress. It can be worn down by a few things. It could be that you're eating a food that you're sensitive to every day. That is a very quick way to wear down the adrenals, and also to damage the thyroid, because certain food sensitivities through the inflammation can make thyroid hormone receptors less reactive, just like an insulin. It's less sensitive, so you need more thyroid hormone to get the same response out of your thyroid that somebody with a healthy thyroid is getting. And again, even if you're on Synthroid, blood work might look good, you might feel a little bit better, but you're wondering why you're not feeling completely better, and it could be because you're still having a food that you're sensitive to that's blocking the thyroid receptors, so that T4 isn't able to get on there and do its work as if you are optimally. So those are the kind of how a food sensitivity works. So with dairy, I'll go through it again. It can be an intolerance, like a lactose intolerance, but it can be that you're sensitive to the whey, the casein, and the casein morphines. And that, like the morphines, if you're sensitive to them, the casein morphines, it's a true addiction, and it's pretty hard to say no when a cheese is sitting right in front of you. And that's usually if you feel like, I am addicted, I cannot put that away. If I open the fridge door and I'm hungry, I'm having a chunk of cheese, you're probably sensitive to it. And I challenge you to, if there's a food that you're thinking about that you think, I probably don't digest that very well, take it out for 30 days, put it back in, see how you do. Because you could be really causing more problems than you think. So with morphines and whey and casein, if you're sensitive, they can actually be, if you have a leaky gut or irritable bowel, they can be going through the intestinal lining, they get to the intestinal immune system, boom, you've triggered an inflammatory reaction. And we know now that if there's systemic inflammation can get through the blood-brain barrier. People with inflammation in the brain have higher rates of depression. So that's the link between food sensitivities and anxiety and depression. The food sensitivity is causing an inflammatory reaction because it's getting through the intestinal lining into the intestinal immune system, which is where most of our immune system is in the intestines. You're increasing the inflammation throughout your body. It's going through the blood-brain barrier, and there you have inflammation in the brain. And we know now that that inflammation in the brain is linked with depression and anxiety. So something to think about if you have any symptoms like anxiety, depression, you've got low mood, you've got PMS, you've got arthritis, you've got joint pain. Those are definitely something to think about and to maybe do an elimination diet. The program that I do, the Guide to Optimal Health, we do eliminate dairy and gluten and sugar. But don't worry, it doesn't sound that scary. It sounds scary, but it's not as scary as it sounds, trust me. You've got food, you've got lots of snacks, tasty ones, sweet ones, lots of protein there to keep you healthy and fat. So I haven't really told any of the groups the last 7 months, but they're basically doing an elimination diet. If you're listening to there and you're in my group, you're doing an elimination diet and you could have been doing it for 2 months. So you're getting rid of any food sensitivities you have, unless you happen to have one like tomatoes, because there's tomatoes on the program, one of the rare ones. But you're eliminating the food that would be causing the intolerance or the sensitivity. So right there, you're decreasing inflammation in your body and you're giving your gut a chance to heal. There's lots more you can do to heal the gut, like probiotics, digestive enzymes, finding out if you have low stomach acid, all of that, which I suggest you would hook up with a practitioner to figure that out so that you know you're not wasting time and that you're finding that missing puzzle piece to the puzzle. But basically by eliminating those, and then if you do choose to reintroduce them, you'd either by eliminating them for 3 or 4 months, you'll probably be able to put them in, especially if you've done something like probiotics, and be able to break them down, and you won't get that inflammatory response, or you'll get less of an inflammatory response if you've taken them out for a few months. So I hope that kind of explains the differences between allergy, intolerance, and sensitivity, and also explains a little bit about why dairy is such a common food for people when they're not able to digest it, and why it's a common food that people take out when they're not feeling well. But I encourage you, if you have any autoimmune, to think about this. Any sign that you've got inflammation in the body, if you've got bad PMS, if you've got depression, if you've got headaches, don't discount the connection that food has on your body. I know it's easy to just reach for a pill, and reaching for the pill could be what gets you to the point of being able to think about foods. Because when we're in pain and not feeling well, it's hard to be cooking, it's hard to be connecting the dots for us. But I encourage you to go to a practitioner that will look at the whole picture and work through that with you, whoever that might be, whatever licensed healthcare practitioner will sit down and kind of talk about the links. And it might be that you need to take that pill until you correct the problem. So when patients come and see me and say, you're going to take me off this medication, they're always so scared we're going to just say, stop all the medication. But I say, I'm not going to rip off the Band-Aid when the wound is still there. Let's heal the wound up, and then the Band-Aid won't be needed. So hope that gives you an understanding. If you find that after dairy, or you do well with dairy, or if you eat too much dairy, that you don't feel great, or that you are absolutely one of those people that are addicted and love cheese. There is a reason, there is science behind that addiction, and there's something going on within the gut and a little bit of a response in the brain as to why you're going for that cheese. So take care, have an awesome day, enjoy the sun, and there's some food for thought. And next time we're going to talk, one of the videos, I'll talk about gluten so that you can see what's going on with gluten, because it's a completely different food than dairy. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.